We're here today to talk about WebVR and the creation and distribution on a mass scale of VR experiences. I'm Tony Parisi, I'm the panel moderator, currently head of VR and AR at Unity Technologies. You may have heard of us. We make the little game development tool that more than 70% of the people making VR and AR use. And I have a particularly long history in web and 3D and virtual reality technology and where those things intersect. It's one of my areas of passion. And we've put together a panel that's going to talk about this in a big way in a second. But overall, the general set of themes we're going to be looking at are distribution and access and reducing friction wherever possible. So as we know in VR and AR today, generally content and applications are delivered via the App Store model that became popular with mobile computing. And that is a great way to deliver packaged content. It's a great way to deliver media content like a game or a movie. It may not be the best way to deliver everything. It may not be the best way for an end user to discover everything. And it may not be the best way for an enterprise customer to actually deploy on mass scale where they need to push updates. So we're going to kind of touch on a lot of those themes, also related to brand advertising and other kinds of long-tail applications in VR. So with that, I'm going to go down the line, and I'm going to have each of the panelists up here introduce themselves and give us a brief bit on what you do at your company, and then we're going to get into the panel.
My name is Josh Carpenter. So I am the UX lead for WebVR at Google. Prior to Google, I was the lead on the Immersv VR team, which was an R&D team of Mozilla, makers of Firefox, who helped to create WebVR with our counterparts at the time at Google. And so what I'm working on right now, and what I can speak a bit about today too, is Chrome VR. You put on a headset and you surf the web from site to site to site without taking your headset off. And then as we make new standards and new tools, not from site to site to site, but from world to world to world. Maybe if you squint your eyes, the precursor of whatever ends up becoming the metaverse.
Hello, I'm Michael Antonov. I'm one of the original founders at Oculus. Originally, I worked a lot on the PC SDK and runtime, a lot in DK1, DK2 days. And more recently, I've gotten involved in WebVR initiative, so leading that team around really two fronts. One front is kind of UI and libraries and frameworks. And we've been doing announcements and moving forward with making React VR available, which is a user interface technology based on some of the original Facebook's open source stack, which makes it possible to bring user interfaces and 3D objects in VR in a browser easily. And the second part is around Carmel, which is actually based on the Chromium project, and it's really a browser slash WebVR player initiative, which makes it possible to go again from world to world in VR using web technologies. So we're kind of trying to combine and make sure that the full stack is addressed well and works well on our devices and really in general for the world.
I'm Andrew Buck. I'm with Immersive, software engineer at Immersive, and Immersive is a distribution and monetization platform for VR. And what that means is that we help address two problems that every publisher has, which is how to get more users and how to make money off their apps.
I'm Dekker Dreyer. I am the Chief Creative Officer at Studio Clever Fox. I'm also a writer, director, producer, and what we've been doing in VR over the last year and a half has been both creating experiences for brands. Some of our clients include Warner Brothers Records, Disney. We've worked on brands like Star Wars, all kinds of cool stuff. But now we're also doing original scripted series. We released one with a company called Matt VR. It's a 10-episode series called The Depths. We released that back in October. We've got 4 more original series that are currently in production. And just love to talk to you guys about how brands can utilize WebVR and also what the production tools can be for live action VFX work and that sort of thing.
I'm Alban Denoyel, co-founder and CEO of Sketchfab. Sketchfab is a platform to publish 3D content to be explored online or in VR. We just passed more than 1 million 3D scenes published on the platform. Sketchfab is integrated with most creation tools. We're native in Photoshop, in Blender, in Modo, so you can publish, so that any 3D creator can publish their stuff to the web in one click via Sketchfab, and then our player is embeddable anywhere on the web. We're natively supported in Facebook or Twitter or Reddit, so that you can display a 3D scene right there on any web page, and then open this scene in VR thanks to WebVR within it.
Fantastic. All right, welcome panelists. So as you can see, we actually have a broad representation here across everything from enabling people to share content to an actual content creator here, so we can keep ourselves honest, to monetization platforms, to the folks making the underlying technology that are actually going to deliver these experiences. So we're going to cover some broad ground here and in no particular order. But I do want to start with my first question. I'm going to direct a few to individual panelists, but please feel free to chime in and bounce off after that initial answer. And some are going to be generally to the panel. So I'm going to start with the elephant in the room here, which is a couple of months ago, Michael Antonov reached out to me and said, we're going to get into WebVR. And after I pulled myself up off the floor because Oculus had launched their whole product with an app store, and everyone was all worried, oh my God, Oculus is just going to close down the whole world. This is a wonderful development, and I started going and talking to them, and I, prior to joining Unity, I actually worked on a project with them. So what I would love for you to do, Michael, is share with the group what Oculus was thinking about when you decided to make the move into WebVR, and what motivated that coming from this place where you'd started with this relatively closed ecosystem.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've originally worked a lot on APIs and SDKs, and around kind of 2014 timeframe, I've learned about some of the WebVR initiatives. So the APIs with Mozilla and Google were doing, and we saw this API come together and slowly mature to a point where more recently it really started to feel that it is actually addressing a number of basic needs that can work well. On the other hand of it, there was a lot of interest in Oculus around efficient scripting and putting content easily together. John Carmack did a lot of that work in VR Script, and the idea of that is to iterate quickly and make it very easy for people to access and host it, to be able to deliver content without necessarily going through a store, so as to grow the ecosystem. So when we looked at all of that and where the WebVR is, it made sense, at least to me, that to leverage all the great technologies which have been built in the browsers. There's a lot of functionality in networking, UIs, all kinds of tech which is easily accessible within a browser platform. And also there's millions of people who are really knowledgeable with this set of frameworks. Therefore, for us, as we want to grow the ecosystem, it kind of made sense to adopt that. Also, if you think about it, Facebook cares about scale, and we'd like to get as many people, maybe hopefully 1 billion people into VR. And one of the ways that really drives is content. So you got to have as much content as you can, and WebVR and leveraging existing knowledge there really lets you potentially get that and get more people engaged. So that is very exciting.
Awesome, great. Anything to add, anyone on that front in terms of motivation behind it? You're already drinking the Kool-Aid, Josh, doing Mozilla and Google and all that, but you want to maybe just amplify on some of the themes Michael just touched on?
Yeah, in 1989, Tim Berners-Lee makes the web as we now know it. And Tim Berners-Lee doesn't make the web and sell it to CD-ROM developers. He sells it to academics. I think it's really important that those of us who think the web has something to contribute to VR are very smart about who we go after. I'm not going to tell EA, I'm not going to tell, a high-end game studio is trying to sell a game for a lot of money based on its amazing graphics to use the web stack. That is not what the web is good at. The web is good at reach. The web is good at interoperability. The web is good at being an existing developer pool. And the web's good at information. So if you have a data set that you want to get to as many people as possible, the web is a wonderful bit of plumbing to go through. If you have existing developers you want to dragoon into making, let's say, a furniture shopping site with 20,000 different pieces of furniture, web is a great solution. So I think what we're trying to do is say, the web is not about displacing current native VR developers. The web is about getting off the bench a pool of millions of additional developers who currently are on the sidelines.
Awesome.
Well, that's a very good point.
Thanks.
Very good point. So, Dekker, I've seen a bunch of your creative work, branded stuff, original stuff. Talk about your touch points with web technology to date and what you might see some of the challenges are, production-wise or deployment-wise, as well as the opportunities there and why shop like Clever Studios would actually
Yeah, absolutely.
get into WebVR?
What we're currently using WebVR for is as a tool to rapidly collaborate for previs and for VFX pipeline stuff. We actually use Sketchfab for sharing of production assets when we were shooting the Sound of Silence video for the band Disturbed for Warner Brothers. We went in and we did a whole bunch of 3D scanning for that, and really Sketchfab and getting it out on the web was the easiest way for a large group of people to collaborate with that kind of an asset. So right now, from a production standpoint, it's great, especially if you're developing in VR. You can go into, Sketchfab as a solution, for example. You can look at what you've scanned. You can share previs material. They support camera animations and all sorts of things that are incredibly helpful. But ultimately, in the brand side of our business, that is a reach business. Everybody wants to be where they can get the most eyeballs. And to a lesser degree, the original content side, is something that wants that same kind of lift. But there are different models around that, subscription, everything else. But really, if we're going to make something that's branded and compelling, they want the absolute most number of people who can see it and engage with it. Right now, as I think everybody in this room knows, there have been some very, very cool branded interactive experiences, but you see them at trade shows and you see them at specialty places. You put on a Vive headset and maybe a very small fraction of the overall audience can see it, experience it, touch it, and it's very clunky in the way that it's deployed out to the mass audience. I see a huge opportunity in WebVR to sort of bridge that gap. You can start seeing all the excellent, interactive room scale motion, all these things that we love just by plugging in a headset and looking at it through the web. And that's that gap point right now where you're seeing all these brands using 360 video because it's easily deployed. When you have something like WebVR, you can just immediately plug in, engage, and get that same kind of reach experience. And that's going to help grow the medium in general because more people are going to be exposed to these very cool things that a lot of companies are putting a lot of money behind.
Let me amplify that point for just 1 second. So the project I actually worked on with Oculus was in partnership with TripAdvisor, and we had downtown San Francisco running in an Oculus Rift. I mean, not high res, wasn't even textured buildings, it was more like a map. You had street map data, you had polygonal data representing the buildings, all from OpenStreetMaps data actually. And then we had some cinematics in there. Carl the Fog was over the city when you first opened it up and put the Rift on. And then that would fade away. And then we just did a gaze and tap interface. You would look at a hotel, and a pop-up would come up, and it was TripAdvisor information with their live data from the hotel. And the cool thing about that was you'd hit a website, and we were using a dev build of Chrome. This is still developer version. You hit the website, and in 2 seconds, the entire experience loads. So that is huge. That's the kind of stuff Dekker's talking about. You get the reach and you get the immediacy there. But man, we teed up a softball for Alban there. We found a Sketchfab user already, so I'll hand it over to you. Why did you decide to go with a web technology instead of a native kind of platform to do this, especially when you're basically representing creatives, and they're creating these wonderful models, and some of them are super beautiful, and you want to make sure you've got the best on rendering, the best on performance, and so why wouldn't you go with a native solution for that, even given the reach issues? So do you want to talk about this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So we started Sketchfab in 2012, so kind of pre-consumer VR. And from the get-go, our goal was to let 3D creators publish their creations outside of the small 3D world. And that's right at the time when WebGL arrived, so like 2011. And it immediately felt like the web was the way to go to have this distribution and this reach going beyond the 3D world, because as a 3D creator, before WebGL, if you wanted to share 3D creation, it was mostly either 2D or sending a file to someone who would have 3ds Max to open that file, basically. And so really build the entire value proposition around sharing 3D content on the web to be viewable on the web. And then we just spent the past 5 years making sure our player is going to be able to support everything that a senior 3D artist is expecting to see on a 3D file, which is physically based rendering, animations, real-time shadows, and so on and so on. And so we got all that running as a player, and then VR comes along, and so WebVR is just the natural step to bring our entire library of things into VR. And I think another thing worth mentioning is that, so not only we made sure content would land on Sketchfab through the web, we also wanted to make sure that from Sketchfab it would go where people are already hanging out, which is like Twitter and Facebook and so on. And so we teamed up with all the publishing network. So we just got whitelisted in Twitter literally a month ago, so that the Sketchfab content can be browsed and explored where people already are. And I think that's one of the big perks of WebVR. Instead of, one of the big challenges of VR is how do we bring people back to their headsets, and our approach that we're bringing like content to where the people are, so like the content comes to your headset basically.
So just so everyone understands this, I want to clarify. So you will be in your Facebook feed, and someone will make a post that actually has a Sketchfab model embedded in it.
Yeah.
Right, so you can see it in 3D on your screen right away, or mobile or desktop. And then you have the little gizmo that says go into VR mode for cardboard. You can put your cardboard on, you're ready to go. Is this also working in WebVR now too, in the Chromium build? You can just say go into VR mode and you're there.
Immersv, full 6 degrees of freedom, and you jump from your newsfeed into Mars basically.
So just tie the threads together. What Josh was talking about now, in the beginning here, you're browsing in 2D, right? But then you discover this wonderful piece of 3D content. You can launch right into it and put the headset on. But now you tie that together with what Josh was talking about, where maybe you're now actually discovering things in VR, and you can instantly, without even having to take the headset off and put it on, actually experience Sketchfab content there, right? That flow is going to be even more seamless once you have VR browsing, right, Josh?
I was going to say, I think innovation tends to happen at the intersection of different disciplines. And when you think about what the VR web is going to, in theory, enable is the intersection between desktop, mobile, and VR. And so I kind of imagine a Sketchfab experience. I might create that on a desktop machine, using the precision of a mouse and keyboard. I publish it to an open format. I put it up on Sketchfab's site. Let's say my friend, she discovers it on her mobile phone, and there's a little magic window because she doesn't have a headset. She can look at it like this, and it's a phone, so she can just do it any time of day. That's a wonderful thing that phones can do. It's in our pocket. We have it all day long. It's a very serendipitous discovery. And then Tony's got a Oculus Rift, and he's got the new Carmel browser from Oculus. He stumbles across that while he's got his headset on and clicks on a link, and now he's looking at that piece of content in virtual reality. I'm excited by the use cases that will only be possible by virtue of desktop, mobile, and VR users being able to actually have shared experiences. The potential there is not to have VR be an audience of millions, but an audience of billions. And I don't think people have really quite grokked that, and I think that there are business models circulating amongst VCs right now that are seeking to tap into that. And I think Sketchfab is sort of a harbinger of things to come.
So yeah, actually, that's one of the things which excites me about WebVR is it's a way to get people into VR while also addressing all the other people who don't yet have VR headsets. So you can really progressively enhance the experience. You can start on your phone or on a desktop, so you can see the same model regardless of the device you have. Now, and then if you happen to have a VR headset, then you can get this even better immersive experience. So the big thing is, this allows people to share and start using the technologies, whether it's libraries we develop or other things and tools, and share with others without them having to actually have it. And that's what allows our industry to grow and VR to grow, because as soon as there's all this content being shared, there's a lot more incentive to actually get the headsets. Yeah. And it kind of becomes this cycle.
Absolutely.
It's like no one buys a GoPro without seeing footage of a surfer somewhere first.
Well, if I can just add on to that too, I think one of the things that was the most compelling for me when the web started to sort of erupt and bandwidth got good enough that you started getting video experiences and hotspots and things. You really, when you open up YouTube, for example, you go down one of these great rabbit holes where you look for the annotations at the end, you're following up with other videos, you're following up this and that. This is sort of an interconnected web of disparate creators that are sort of being culled together and curated through algorithms and preferences and that sort of thing. And the open web, the WebVR sort of model allows you to traverse many different experiences from many different creators and studios without leaving that headset environment too. And I think that that's going to be crucial, that you're not constantly taking it off, leaving the environment, coming back in, trying to find another piece of content, searching around. As soon as it becomes seamless to follow a trail of content, then you're going to start seeing people staying in much, much, much longer. You're going to see deeper integrations in the times that people do spend. It's going to be a very, very cool future, and it's coming very quickly.
And I think the flip side of that coin is, I think one of the challenges that VR has is sort of fatigue. You have to take the headset out, you have to get it on, and then, maybe if you take it on too long, maybe you still get nauseous, I don't know. But it's something that it's sort of a barrier to, I don't feel like using VR because I don't want to go through that hassle. You have to open up a special app and get into it. And I think that it may make, WebVR may indeed make people wear the headsets longer. I think it also gets them to wear it less if they choose to. If they can have that same experience on their phone or in the browser, but then there's one thing they want to see in VR. WebVR lets them transition to that and take it off again. And I think if they didn't have that ability, they would have used VR less, in total.
And absolutely, really, and the underlying theme here is that all that content is 3D, right? I mean, the mobile case, the desktop use case without a headset, and it's what I like to call non-immersive monoscopic VR, but it's still VR. And so now we can cover everybody with essentially the same content. Now, when you get in there and you actually design your experiences, you do make some trade-offs for immersion versus flat screen. So it's not like you just push a button and everything's done. But in general, you're reusing that same content. 90+% of that application is the same. So Andrew, actually, let's get into your world a little bit.
Sure.
So Immersive makes digital marketing, interactive display advertising, largely focused on a game SDK right now, right?
It doesn't have to be games, but VR apps, yeah.
Yeah, but VR app SDK, based on the engines like Unity and Unreal and all that kind of stuff, right? And but you're also looking at the web. And can you talk about that a little bit, obviously without giving away the product plan?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so we don't use WebVR at the moment, but we are excited about it, the future of WebVR, and we definitely want to support our partners that want to use WebVR going forward. But sort of the way our flow works is we give an SDK to a VR developer, and they integrate it into their app, and then that SDK gives them the ability to easily load an ad in the background and then show the ad when they choose to. The users transition to a sort of a separate scene where they watch the ad, and then after, the developer is paid for every completed ad experience they have. And I think that sort of same flow would work just as well in the web. The only minor challenge I see is sort of an interaction with the operating system. So at the end of our ad experience, we have a call to action. We have a little end card that comes up and it says, let's say this is an ad for an app. Do you want to install the app now or later or neither? And if it's now, I think the web, that works just as well on the web. The users transition into a flow to install the app. If it's later, what we do is we send a notification to the operating system. It shows up in your system notifications, and you can click it whenever you're ready later. And I think that that flow doesn't work as well, or it's a challenge for JavaScript to be able to do, for WebVR to be able to do. But it's a minor thing. I'm sure there's a workaround. I think the overall ad experience works just as well in VR. And I think there's also a third aspect to this beyond native and web, which is sort of a hybrid app. And if you look at mobile apps, non-VR, just mobile, you can make an app with PhoneGap or Cordova or other packages that you write the app in JavaScript, but it's packaged as if it's a native app. And I think that theoretically you can do the same thing with WebVR. Even if the app itself is native, the ad package, the ad SDK, could be WebVR. And if you look at the history of mobile advertising, it sort of followed that same path, where initially the ad SDKs were native, and then they became an ad SDK that was web or was HTML5, and that's a win-win because it lets the ad network, like Immersive, update the code without the publisher having to change their app, and which is also a win for the publisher, which is why it's win-win. So I wouldn't be surprised to see that same evolution where SDKs such as ad SDKs for VR were written in WebVR eventually, even if the app itself is native.
Wonderful. Now, a lot of you probably out there are just wondering if there's a little bit of BS in this, though, in terms of just where we are with WebVR in terms of its quality, rendering, performance, and all that kind of stuff. So I want to open this one up to the whole group, and everyone wants to jump into this first. Share with the folks here where we think we are in terms of performance, everything from head tracking to rendering speed and WebGL, and anything else, and across mobile and desktop as well. So love to get people's thoughts on that, either from suffering through bad performance as a content creator, or some of the people working on the engine stuff.
Well, when I think one of the first browsers I actually worked with was an early experimental build of Chrome, and I remember when I got it, there was a time when there was a lot of kind of judder and instability in the way things worked. And then after a while later, and I think that was kind of more in the beginning of this year, there were some updates and things were made where actually the scene and things became a lot more stable. Now, we've also have our own version of it, so we've been able to take that and actually improve the latency of it. So I think when you look at VR, there's like few basic things. The most basic thing is, are you hitting the frame rate? And is your latency good enough so you can, say, move your head left and right or around, and the world is stable? So as far as I can see now, at least in our versions and in something which exists out there, that bar has been reached. So beyond that, you have a second question. How much content, now that this bar is reached, and I'm not going to say it's perfect, there's these things to kind of work out, but overall, then how much can you display? And that's where you can be more affected by both the kind of mobile GPU rendering performance, perhaps the JavaScript interpretation speed. So in that area, there's certainly a lot more we can improve. And I think across the WebVR as a whole, there's a lot to do to even get to some of these basics in all of the browsers, because it's not just even if we do something, all the other companies, some of them get ahead, some of them follow up, but we get most powerful once these features are actually everywhere. But the good thing is, like, we're actually about to release Carmel as I speak, or hopefully very, very soon.
Thanks for taking the time out today, Michael. Actually, in a sprint crunch as we speak.
But the basics are there. So you can display a simple scene, you can add polys, you can have interactivity. So from then on, it's going to be about optimization of both the browser stack and the hardware, and us kind of all working together to make sure that there's set and clear expectations of what people can achieve.
Well, I think that as an artist, as a content creator, there are definitely things that you cannot do right now. There are things that are not going to be within the realm of possibility. Some of the things that we've seen that are great from Sketchfab are that, you can load textures, you can load, motion caption animations, that sort of thing, but it's not going to be at the same level as the kind of stuff that we can get in stereoscopic 360 video if we're doing a sort of a pre-rendered experience. But that isn't to say that it's useless right now for us in what we do, because ultimately it's an aesthetic challenge, it's a compelling story challenge. These are the kinds of questions that we have to find a way as artists to make those compromises. I mean, one of the first 3D video games that I ever played was Star Fox, way back in the early 90s. That's what, 10 polygons, but it's still a compelling experience with the technology that you had and what was able to be displayed. And even today, you go back to it and you go, this is fun, it's a really cool game, right? So you have to find those aesthetic challenges and the limitations and work around them. So I never like to say that it's not ready for this or it's not ready for that. It's just ready for us to come in and say what is possible, what looks great, what's going to be exciting for people to use right now, and then keep iterating on top of that.
Can somebody in the back give us a 5-minute warning? I don't have my phone here. It was dead, so I'm charging it up. Just let me know at 3:10, please.
Just maybe to add very quickly on that, like the way we think about it is up until now, WebVR has been sort of possible, experimental, one-off little builds somewhere that the developer made and put on a site. In 2017, it becomes real because you've got Edge shipping support from Microsoft, which maybe people don't know, but they're integrating WebVR support into Windows Holographic. You've got Oculus shipping support in their own first-party browser through Carmel. You've got Google shipping VR browsers at this point, bundled with Daydream, built on top of Chrome. It becomes real. Now, it's real, but there's still a lot of performance, low-hanging fruit that we can achieve. Now, with Oculus in the game, working with our company, and hopefully Microsoft as well, you've got 3 very large companies and Samsung pooling resources to bring the platform forward. You've got more developers jumping in the pool and making money off of this, hopefully, pretty fast, which increases the impetus for executives inside large organizations to give more headcount to engineering teams. I think that my ideal is to be able to stand up on stage in Google I/O 2018 and say, it's not just real, it's open for business. This is a platform on top of which you can begin to make money and build real applications and real companies. Like that's very hand-wavy, but I can see that kind of arc, that being the arc that plays out over the next couple of years.
Let's talk about mobile. So I think I've heard the Daydream team say that the first WebVR implementation that would ship would be on Daydream before desktop Chrome. Is that still true, Josh? And
yep.
Just go down the line, and I think Oculus and Carmel, we're going to ship mobile first, right? So we're going to get into mobile a little bit here, and let's go down the line, or everybody jump in.
Yeah, sure. Maybe it helps to describe in Q1, Q2, hand wavy. We'll see.
You'll be able to get Chrome for Android on your Android phone, on a Pixel phone. Browse any website, video, 2D, WebGL, doesn't matter. Serendipitously find something you like, drop it into your Daydream headset, put on the headset, and see that website in front of you. If it's a 2D website, it's floating like a little floating pane with a lovely UI, hopefully, if I do my job, surrounding it. It's fun and easy to use. You click on a link, and this next site is a WebVR site. So all of a sudden, the window dissolves, and you're standing in a forest with surround audio all around you. And there's like a deer in that forest, and you click on the deer, and the world dissolves, and now you're looking at a Wikipedia entry about a deer with a kind of a rotating deer in the middle of it or some such. And everything is seamless. There's very little UI. I'm not trying to aggrandize the UI developers here. I'm trying to get the UI the heck out of there. So we really focus on creating an immersive canvas that creators can fill with content. That starts off with Daydream platform, which is a 3DOF platform with a 3DOF controller. And then we want to expand. I mean, Chrome is everywhere in computing, so we want to be wherever VR is, which means 6DOF as well. And we're beginning to work through, and in fact, from day one, really, I've tried to think about how do we design a 3DOF VR experience that's going to scale to 6DOF as well. I was just chatting with Michael backstage. I mean, I think this is an opportunity, and in fact, it behooves us, everyone who's going to be building on top of Chromium, to begin to chat about what the UX of this is going to look like. Because I want to see a lot of innovation in the browser UX space. I think we've got a really wonderful infinite canvas to work with to rethink what browsing is from a product design perspective. At the same time, it's important that developers have a guarantee that their websites will be viewed with certain conditions, certain guarantees. For example, if I make a WebVR 360 site, if Sketchfab makes a site, they ought to know that they've got the entirety of the 360 experience available to them, every single pixel, that the browser will never, ever, ever take away a pixel of real estate for browser UI stuff. You know what I mean? It's like that's extraordinarily important, and that only happens if some of the vendors out there who are going to be building browsers begin to talk about what guarantees we want to build into the user experiences that we build. So 3DOF first, 6DOF later, and you begin to see more dialogue, ideally in the open because it's the web, and that's sort of our unfair advantage, happening over the next quarter.
Why mobile though? Why mobile first instead of just nailing it on Chromium for Vive and Rift?
Google's got a mobile platform.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that?
I mean, it's really about getting VR experience to as many users as we can. For us, Gear VR has really, at this point, millions of users. So it's the most reach we can have. And the other interesting thing about it is the people who are on Gear VR, this kind of have different kinds of interests. So it's sort of desperate. Some they are interested in 3D games, they are full experiences, and others really enjoy watching 360 media experiences. It could be photos, it's a lot of media. So especially, I feel that for the later group, WebVR kind of naturally fits in, because going forward, there's a lot you can do with interactive media within the WebVR space, where you can customize it, add interactivity, which is combined with video in very interesting ways, and deliver it to people quickly. So this is an area where WebVR and the web technology is particularly strong, because you don't need millions of polys. You just need to have something compelling. And these are the types of experiences we can make available, and which can actually work well on mobile, so you don't need the desktop hardware. So it kind of gets WebVR started going forward. And also, if you look at the mobile, there's certainly some performance and GPU and CPU limitations. So one of the things we wanted to do with Carmel, and actually our Carmel developer preview, which is about to come out, is a little different in that it's not yet a full browser. It's going to head there. But what we really wanted to do is give people ability to have this as good a quality WebVR experiences, so they can start developing and iterating, not just on a flat 2D surface, but making those worlds. So that's why we're trying to get it out there. And getting it out there on a mobile platform means that whatever you make will actually run. And once we move to the desktop, we'll just have more hardware resources, so we can port and get it to run on all the other hardware easily. So in that sense, once you've hit mobile, it's much easier to hit PC versus the other way around.
Let's talk about tools. So I work at a company that's got a great development tool, arguably much higher end than anything you can use to build for the web, right? Unity does have WebGL export, but it's through a technology that ultimately results in a somewhat long download. So it's good for games and some longer form content, not great for snackable size VR and advertising yet. So Wondering from you folks, where do you think the ecosystem of tools and content creation goes over the next couple of years?
Oh, but what happens with the tool?
Yeah. I mean, you both have been involved in tools and frameworks, right? But they're more coder tools in a sense, or just markup tools. But there's also the Pro Tool stuff like Unity, Unreal. So I'm wondering where you think this is all going to, what kind of ecosystem this turns into over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, I think so I was the lead on A-Frame. And A-Frame was Mozilla's attempt to radically lower the barrier to entry to creating WebVR experiences. You write a bit of HTML, we got a website that runs in VR, and on desktop and on mobile within 5 minutes. But it's deep, it's extensible. So you can also go online and find a gravity engine that someone built and plug it into your A-Frame scene because it's got an entity component model under the hood. When we built A-Frame, we were a tiny team. We couldn't build Unity, we couldn't build, let's say, a play canvas or WYSIWYG environment, but what we could do was build a little framework that was easy to pick up, but very extensible. And basically, I described our mandate to the team as throw a lit match into a dry field. With the web, you've got tons of existing developers. Open source means that one thing built in Russia is picked up by a teenager in Idaho within seconds through GitHub and NPM. It's a very combustible environment. So when I think about tooling, I think about there being in a year a Squarespace of WebVR. You don't make your own WebVR site, you flip some dials and you pick from a template, and you got a Squarespace generated website. You've got different WYSIWYG tools are used to build more rich scenes. Let's say Visor is a great example of this, Play Canvas are great examples of this. I think the way we get to that is by making the platform really, really fast and accessible. Then two, building fairly low-level enabling tools like React VR, like A-Frame, that get a certain group of web developers that are existing off the bench to start making stuff. Using those tools and open source and sharing, we begin to identify in aggregate where there are business opportunities to create more specific tools, more targeted tools, or more specific business models. And so like a dowsing stick, the open source community sort of tells us where the hot spots are, if I can mix metaphors. And then towards the end of the year, I think maybe-ish some tools already exist, like Sketchfab most notably. You see more and more specialized tools begin to emerge that are actually designed to facilitate certain use cases. Whether you want to make a social game or you want to make like a first-person shooter, I think you'll see specialized tool sets for that. So that roughly is how I can see this playing out. And frankly, all I'm describing is a continuation of what we've already seen so far.
Yes, I mean, certainly the exciting thing about WebVR is that it allows so many people and tools to publish to it. So I believe that trend will certainly continue. And lots of companies and engines and things will find ways of targeting existing technologies. And there's also going to be more frameworks and things which people kind of plug in and combine. So for me personally, I didn't actually have a lot of experience with web UI development, and React was kind of one of the first ways I got involved. And I really liked some really core things about it, just how easy it made laying out of the UI without state, and the idea of taking that and combining it with the 3D. And I know 3D is kind of a challenging thing because it has this extra dimension which you can't quite as easily arrange things. Like in 2D, you would just have layouts. In 3D, you need to do a lot of exploration. And at the same time, providing those type of frameworks to people and having them contribute and build, whether it's React, whether it's other tools, I think it'll be very empowering. So it'll all start coming together.
No, I mean, that's interesting, but I mean, isn't all that stuff just at the toy level of development? I mean, I'm just going to play devil's advocate for a second. I'm very ambivalent on these kind of issues personally. So, it's easy to put up a cube, throw some photos on it. It's easy to maybe make a 360 viewer. But when I want to make a really rich interactive experience like I could do in, say, one of the game tools, do you think that that's going to relegate a lot of WebVR content to being toy content, or do you believe the Pro Tools will come in and fill the gap of being able to deploy into the web as well? I mean, how do you see that part playing out? Do you really think it ends up being just much more simplistic types of content? No,
I mean, look at Sketchfab. Sketchfab, if you haven't seen a WebVR player, I mean, I'm speaking for Alban now, but it is beautiful. So Sketchfab, this is the early days still, and Sketchfab has achieved a beautiful, really well-designed browsing experience for their massive asset library.
Why don't you jump in on that?
Yeah, please.
And elaborate.
No, I agree.
And scene. Do I buy you beer or do you buy me beer?
No, but I think, I think we said at the beginning that for long-form games and movies, of course, maybe it's going to provide a better experience to download that thing. But for a lot of things that are more snackable content, as you said, WebVR is just perfect. And I don't necessarily think of VR as something where there need to be a crazy level of interactivity A lot of people don't want to be shooting zombies in space. They just want to go to a virtual space in VR and hang out there and explore things. And typically at Sketchfab, so most of our content is non-gaming. We have hundreds of museums publishing their collections in 3D on Sketchfab, and you can browse them in VR. And you definitely don't need a game engine for that. And WebVR is just a perfect way to publish that. And our goal at Sketchfab is to provide a seamless publishing tool for the creators. The creators are not going to go through, some will, but they don't do code, they do creation. And we want to let them, it's the power of user-generated content. It has to be able to reach the audience seamlessly and at the click of a button. And that's what we're trying to do.
Well, I think that being able to translate an experience coming from something that's completely outside of the development cycle of these other guys, being able to translate something that you create very specifically with intent in a package like Maya or Cinema 4D or any of these other kinds of things, and getting it into WebVR in a way that is at least scalable and at least has some of the same aspects to it, like the motion of the characters and things. Building tools that will be able to plug into existing packages that artists are already familiar with and use formats that they can immediately export, like FBX and things like that. Those are really where I think the artists are going to start picking this up. It has to be familiar to them and it has to work with what they already know. So it can't be too far outside of the field as being like specific WebVR tools. Otherwise, it might stifle what they're able to achieve with it, right? So, I don't know if you guys think I'm completely out of whack with it or not.
No, it's all good. We have about 4 minutes left, so I want to make sure we cover one more last question, and it's going to be, you got to do it, it's obligatory in a panel like this. We'll start with you, Andrew, but everyone, I'd like your individual answer on this in about 30, 40 seconds. So is this the metaverse? Is WebVR the foundation for the metaverse everyone's dreaming about, where everything's all interconnected and seamless and in a beautiful artificial world that we can go escape into as needed, or maybe use to help us understand things, but we're all communicating in there the way everyone's looking at their phones right now because I'm boring them. Andrew, what do you think? And then I want everyone to get time to answer this.
Maybe I'm short-sighted. I don't see that as the metaverse. I think that the power of VR is immersion. But I think that immersion is also has a downside, which is that you can't do the things at the same time. If I'm browsing on my web on my phone, I can be doing something else, or on my computer, be doing something else. And so, as much as beautiful as VR is, and WebVR makes that more accessible to everyone. I feel like it's going to be a complement. It's not going to take over everything. But I do think that WebVR will become the most popular way to access VR.
Would that change? Would your answer change if VR also comprised AR? Or XR, or whatever you want to call it these days, so that you weren't shut off from the outside world. But
at that point, I don't know if it's WebVR, but yeah, I think that if you had hardware that was like this pair of glasses and could give you AR, then I would change my answer. Yeah.
Fair enough. Who's next?
Well, metaverse is a very awesome concept. We've all read Neil Stephenson. I don't really know what real shape it'll take. So, the idea of walking from door to door to get to my, text authoring app, or for it may not make as much sense as teleporting there, accessing things instantly. With that said, I think metaverse will come from many different companies, many different technologies coming together in ways we can't yet predict. Yet, the WebVR does provide some of the basic building blocks on which we can evolve. So the browser has the networking functionality. We have rendering. We can create worlds, and we can create links where somebody else manages that other room. So in that sense, I do see social coming to web in some shape soon, and it'll be a big part of the metaverse. But it'll take a while for it to evolve into something which is fantastic.
Oh, dude, we don't have that much more time, do we? Dekker.
You know what? It's actually 2035. We're all plugged into it right now. We just don't realize it. I can't speak for for the development side of it and what this technology will ultimately turn itself into. But it's a tremendous stepping stone toward the metaverse. It absolutely is.
I would say I think there's still a strong connotation of the browser being a browser window, but as soon as it's WebVR and there is no window and kind of what I just described, for me, it's kind of the metaverse, being able to jump from virtual worlds to virtual worlds. And when you look at the demo Zuckerberg did at OC3, it was just like magical to jump from his office to his home, and it's just like infinite, unlimited virtual worlds connected together.
Yeah, I tend to the word meta is very important to me in metaverse. It implies ubiquity, interoperability. A metaverse that only works on VR isn't very interesting to me. A metaverse that works across different devices, most of which will still be the vast majority of computing devices out there, I think is the only metaverse worth having. So the way I think of it now is that William Gibson's got a saying, I know the future's here, it's just not evenly distributed. I think it was William Gibson. Yeah. I think the web and metaverse is kind of the inverse. The metaverse isn't here, but it's evenly distributed. Web is everywhere. I mean, the web is the plumbing on top of which whatever it comes to constitute future social networks, which I think is what we're talking about, will be built for reach. I mean, I think that's how this actually plays out.
That's a tough act to follow. So with that, I think we're actually done with the panel. Let's have a round of applause for our panelists.